I grew up around Detroit, Michigan, and attended Michigan Tech up next to Lake Superior. Then 9/11 2001 changed the economy, and I completed my first bachelor's degree shortly thereafter. Finding no entry level position in the couple years following, and not wanting to continue the odd jobs that's moving companies, and pool hall security, and part time cold call sales, or quote direct marketing as the euphemism has it, and of course the ski shop where I worked at in high school, I saved what little money I could in the winter of 2004 2005, working from open to close at the Boyne Country Sports and sleeping in my car that February after 12-hour days at the shop just to buy the plane ticket and pay for the teaching certification program in Thailand. I had $600 in my pocket when I moved, looking to start a new career. And in March 2005, I started teaching. After a year of teaching English in several provinces throughout Thailand for about $1,000 per month there, I went to Chengde, China, north of Beijing, to teach at a university. It paid $500 per month with an apartment on campus. And at the end of that year, teaching business and tourism English, the university there paid me out in cash, which I found out to have been counterfeit upon trying to exchange it in Thailand, which I returned to after kind of missing the hot weather and more or less interesting and accepting and culture climate there. So two or three banks refused the bills that I brought, and I was really panicking. So I sent out emails soliciting help from friends and family back home, and luckily my cousin Matt sent over a couple $100 to tide me over till I started my new position in the ancient capital of Ayutthaya. And I even got the bonus after Matt sent the money of exchanging those counterfeit bills on a last effort at a shady, unregulated money changer down by the beach. Nonetheless, there was definitely a moment of great need there. I met Sangthong Tanilian, then Sangthong Sukulnor Singh, while she was working at a guest house there in Ayutthaya. I saw a familiar sign as I was getting into the city, and I told the bus driver to stop. And there she was behind the counter. And I recalled first words I said to her were, "You're beautiful." And I don't know if she remembers that or not, but I remember that very clearly. That was not normal for me to even think. Not after traveling around and seeing millions and millions of people, most of whom I considered ugly, either on the outside or inside or both. And after a couple nights at her guest house, my new boss and school owner set me up with an apartment just around the corner in the lazy river town full of ancient temples, one of the ancient capitals of Thailand. Nook, as her nickname goes, was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week there, and maybe for $250 a month, and that was not the worst salary she'd ever had. Just after high school, she moved out of her village several hours down into Chiang Mai to do in-home healthcare for a woman who was working with the Ministry of Education. And this was a great opportunity for somebody from the Hill Tribe village, absolutely. But working 6 years, taking care of the woman's ailing parents until they died at age 99 and 100, for some $100 or $150 a month or something, was not exactly putting money away for retirement. And then after the parents died, she was out of work again, so she tried working at a Lay's potato chip factory briefly, but I've heard a couple stories, and it sounds like it was too hot, too demanding, and stressful for extremely low pay with a very bad manager. So she went back and asked that Ministry of Education lady if there was anything else, and sure enough, that lady was operating a guest house in her hometown of Ayutthaya through some friends who owned the property there. And so Sangtong moved down there, which is about 8 hours from Chiang Mai, and then maybe 12 to 15 hours from her hometown. And so she commenced to cleaning and checking people in and out and learning a bit of English. And she was there for maybe a year or a little more before I arrived. And I like to think of it as kind of fate or kismet or God's plan or something like that, since there were so many kilometers and obstacles and preventing our meeting, and the odds were extremely small that we would ever meet. And even though I lived just around the corner, it's very unlikely that I would have met her if I hadn't spontaneously told the bus driver to stop upon seeing the sign. So when people ask me how I met, sometimes I like to say, I got off the bus at the right time. And so after checking out of that guest house in early 2007, maybe March, April 2007, I checked into my new apartment, and I didn't have any friends. And she was friendly, beautiful, like I said, outside, in my opinion, but more importantly, inside. Her kindness and sincerity shine brightly in a world where so many people have trouble with that, shining and showing their kindness and sincerity. and being vulnerable and letting their guard down. And so I would walk over after work and drink her coffee and help with some chores if needed. And I thought it very cute that she would say I could wash the trees. It was a direct translation from Thai, Rot Nam Dom Mai. But I enjoyed washing the trees. And we cleaned out the goldfish pond and developed a mutual fondness of one another. And since both of us were old enough and sure of our mutual want of a committed monogamous relationship, after discussing some matters of life ambitions and goals and sharing core values and things, we decided to marry very quickly. To be clear, marriage is both easy and hard. It's merely a matter, if you ask me, of making a decision and then continuing to make the same decision over again in perpetuity. But with the job situation and money being so tight and the cultural and language differences and the, let's say, emasculating situation that results when a man makes so little money and is kind of stuck in a way in a foreign culture. Well, anyway, it's basically impossible that we would have a fairy tale romance. And so she lived and worked at her guest house there on Rojanao Road in Ayutthaya. And I worked there at the New International School as a secondary math and science teacher for a few months anyway, before making the mistake of asking for, nay, demanding, a legal work permit, bearing the name of the actual employer rather than the local university where the headmaster's wife had been employed. And after that, I found myself out of work from that yet unlicensed school, and so I found another primary math and English job 3 hours away by 2 buses, a minibus and a cattle truck in Nonthaburi. So I moved out of my apartment and actually stayed there in the tiny office with Nook for a little while, commuting 5 or 6 hours a day back and forth between Ayutthaya and Nonthaburi. Again, on 2 buses, a minibus, and a cattle truck. And so before too long there, I said something to a Thai teacher about how they shouldn't hit the kids, especially since it's illegal. And so off I went to another school in central Bangkok to teach primary math and English again, keeping with the commute, that is, until I complained about Thai teachers hitting small children for what seemed like no reason at all, let alone any good reason. So it was time then for me to find another employer, this time to Bangkapi, on the other side of town where I taught secondary English. And at that point I couldn't justify the commute anymore, it was just too much. So I got an apartment and Nook and I saw each other on some nights and every weekend for a little while. And it was hard for both of us, this fledgling relationship that we had committed to keep together. But we did our best and laughed and cried and went through the range of emotional experiences that so many couples do. And before too long, I found myself moving into another secondary math and science job across the river in Thonburi, this time because my male contract agent in Bangkapi, well, we'll just say that he was a little more hands-on than I was comfortable with. I was fairly accustomed to the odd groping and certainly the more or less constant remarks, but sometimes I'm less receptive to this sort of things than others. So I started up there at Thonburi at the school that looked like a corny play castle with unlicensed murals and gaudy statues of Disney and WB cartoon characters all around. And that lasted for a couple months until I made some comment about the wrong visa, some other teachers having told of buying their degrees faked on Khao Road or something like that. And so off I went to another Thonburi school for a few months as a secondary math teacher. That is, until it took it upon myself to interrupt the queue of students awaiting a whipping by the PE teacher, and I dramatically broke his bamboo switch over my knee, which was an unsufferable offense apparently. Breaking the bamboo stick over my knee, not the actual illegal whipping of the children, because apparently protecting the children from drunken and otherwise mischievous teachers who constantly break their own laws and do anything but set a good example of how to be non-confrontational and peaceful is a big no-no. So after that one, I had lined up a job back in China, and I was set to leave. Really, I was tired of it. When, upon Sangthong's pleading, I tried once more in Thailand, this time in non-province, which I think is the origin of the term nonsense. I think it's fairly clear how that English instructional position turned out, but as luck had it, we were finally going to do our wedding ceremony. So Nook quit her job and I mine, and we went to Ban Hoi Na for the big wedding. A few months later, we both started back at school in Chiang Mai, she doing her bachelor's in business and I doing my MBA. So I taught primary math and science part-time, and we studied for a while until my graduation, at which time she stayed in Chiang Mai to finish hers, and I moved to Nakhon Pathom to teach primary math and science while commuting into Bangkok for my PhD in international law. I'd make the trip up to Chiang Mai as frequently as possible to spend time with my wife, and we Skyped every day. Luckily, Thailand's cellular network is better than that in the US, even in 2010, 2011. Thaksin Shinawat did one thing right. And when she graduated with her bachelor's, she stayed in Chiang Mai for another several months to complete a nurse's aid certificate program, and thereafter finally came to join me. By this time, I was working as a secondary math teacher in Samut Prakan, still commuting into the university in Bangkok, but after having enough of the usual shenanigans at that Samut Prakan school, and after completing all my colloquium courses at the university so I could just do my dissertation basically remotely and going to the university once every few months to meet with my advisor, we decided to leave Bangkok area for a more relaxing environment down in Klong Yai, on the thin strip of the mainland perpendicular to Koh Kut. They're in the Trop province, where there isn't much other than a single main road, a few small blocks of houses on stilts, and a kilometer or less of landmine-littered jungle between the Gulf of Thailand and the Kingdom of Cambodia. It would be beautiful hiking were it not for the landmines. The Klong Yai School gave her a job in the office and with helping me with co-teaching for about $200 a month, which was something. And given that salaries of foreign teachers have flatlined at about $1,000 a month for more than a decade, something definitely helped. It was better than nothing. Particularly since, although our monthly income was greater than Thai teachers, we didn't have any of the benefits like retirement or low interest loans or health care for family or anything like that. So a little extra money definitely helped. Nook and I stayed there for a year and a half before I got a message on LinkedIn from a recruiter at Disney English. And it caught my attention, so I interviewed and got the job. So after the semester ended, we wanted to be proper, so we finished out the semester. We said our fond farewells to the faculty and staff at the best school I've ever known in Thailand, which may say a lot, or not very much at all, or both. And with the diligent insistence of the Walt Disney Shanghai English Training Company, now no longer in operation, both my Thai national wife and I moved to Shanghai for training, and then we went out to Chengdu in the Sichuan province, where the air quality was, well, shall we say, not up to my standards. I got bronchitis very often. And although I had dreamed of repatriating to the United States where I would become a math teacher, and I had worked after hours earning a certificate recognized by several states, and I flew off to Hong Kong to do my testing and things, I didn't have nearly enough income or savings to support her application for the green card. The American immigration system, even or especially for foreign spouses, is complex, bureaucratic, extremely slow, and in my opinion, grossly unjust. But as fate would have it, on a whim, I applied for a couple jobs in Saudi Arabia during my week off of time in lieu that I accrued at Disney, and I got an offer. So I signed and scanned and emailed my paperwork, and Nook and I were off to Bahrain to await our visas to the often misunderstood and criticized and seldom appreciated or praised Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And after some nail-biting uncertainty over work visit visas attached to family visit visas there in Bahrain, we were on the company bus to wait through the 4 hours of border-crossing drudgery and finally into one of the few unseen places left in the world, the Great Arabian Desert. Well, that and plenty of shoddy-looking buildings constructed with cheap materials and labor and really bad drivers. I mean, really, really unbelievably bad drivers. And at the end of our first year at Hofuf, in Hofuf KSA, King Abdullah passed and the visa rules changed. Of course, these rules were apparently not communicated very thoroughly to visa agents via some sort of national gazette that other countries have. There being very, very actual written encoded law in Saudi Arabia, this being one of the odder points. So anyway, Nook and I were stuck in Bahrain for a month, waiting visa renewal at the end of the academic year, during which time we were informed that the Saudi government office in Dammam had lost our applications some 2 or 3 times before finally telling our company's visa specialist of the changes to the visa system. But the company paid for a hotel the whole time and paid me through the end of my contract, even though it was actually cut short by a month or more. And I appreciated that so much, the good faith and fair dealing that frames the foundation of contract law in Canada, where most of our managers are from, that I chose to go back to the United States, sign another contract with the same employer, go back to the U.S., do all the tests and checks and paperwork, and wait for the residence permit/employment visa. I'll spare the boring details of that process, but I must say pooping in a cup was something I'd never considered doing prior. And as fate or God's plan or whatever other words can condense a nearly limitless number of details into a number of words so small that it fits into the tiniest attention span, we arrived in Ann Arbor by Amtrak from Chicago O'Hare, just in time to bring my mother to the intensive care unit, as she had some allergic reaction to vancomycin. The antibiotic the doctors administered for the staph infection she got from the patella grafted onto her knee from a cadaver after her second or third knee replacement surgery, depending on who's counting. The first one had to be reset because it was put in wrong, and then they replaced that one since, I don't know. I think I'm supposed to believe that it's because the American medicine system is the best in the world, and that's why it's also expensive and private, but it sure seems like they really fucked that one up on my mom's knee. So for that 2015 summer, my wife got to apply some of her nursing training, shall we say, cleaning up mom's body in moments when mom was too embarrassed to ask me. And we cleaned the weeping blisters and ooze that covered her whole body after the, quote, medicine basically turned her skin inside out. I think the official name was DRESS syndrome, and I suspect Mom could have easily died had King Abdullah's death not led to a change in the visa rules, which required our return to the USA for that summer. Had we not been there, there's a fair chance that she would have died. When we would have gone to Thailand otherwise. And I believe Mom knew that because I think that was the first length of time, and I mean the first, whether a day or a month, or in this case 3 months, since I left for high school in 1996, that I had been in her home, any home, alone or with my wife or whatever, when she did not kick me out. That fact alone speaks to the severity of her condition in 2015. So I spent all my savings, and I paid off the remaining balance on her car and things, and we left for another contract at the university there in the Eastern Province by Bahrain International Airport, a contract that led to another and several more to the present day. I tell these stories not to brag or boast or complain about how hard my life has been or whatever. It's been phenomenal, and I feel absolutely blessed. I like myself, and I have the love of a good woman. And we've been lucky enough to find work where I could save the amount of money required to satisfy the outrageous demands of the wannabe carpetbagger, closet xenophobes, and all three branches of the U.S. government, who require far too much from American citizens trying to sponsor a simple green card application for their foreign spouse. As far as hardships go, sleeping in the arch in Vientiane and getting groped far too many times by local teachers and administrators, whether male or female, and getting denied service explicitly because of my race or national origin, and having to find new schools to work at because I dared to demand that teachers and administration follow the actual letter of the law regarding child safety and corporal punishment, i.e. don't hit the kids, and having to wait an extra year and a half while paying tuition at university in Bangkok just to stay enrolled in my PhD program after my advisor quit, and trying and hoping and wishing and praying for a child and having no luck on that front. Well, these things are hard, but they also build character. These experiences for years and years abroad, being forced to be independent and adapt and change and accept things that go against principles and standards I have and have been taught over the course of my life. These are instructional experiences that will surely yield wisdom I don't even know exists yet. Like RuPaul Charles said in AJ and the Queen, people can be more than one thing. I can't possibly reduce the whole world or even one person to a single moment, or some trifle, or some act of aggression, or point of ignorance, or time of weakness. Not without understanding there's more in that person and in those people than just that one thing. Living as a foreigner in foreign cultures, being a non-native speaker of the dominant language, living as a minority so small that I would sometimes grow uncomfortable around people who, quote, look like me, and dealing with the headaches and logistics of visas and passports and immigration, and experiencing other legal traditions and other business practices and other cultures and perceptions of time, alternative viewpoints and commonly understood ideas, or what we think are commonly understood ideas, and joining people of other faiths in prayer, and adopting beliefs and assumptions that would violate those of people where I'm from, embracing other ways of life as my own. These have informed me about more objective reality. But most importantly, finding a wife who comes from one of the most capital-starved, out-of-the-way places on earth. So much that until recently, the road literally ended before we got to her village. Yet, also witnessing how close their familial ties are and how they interact with each other and show love and sympathy and acceptance, even in the face of argument or apparent conflict, and how they never turn their backs on one another, certainly not for long or so seriously. How generous the people of the world have been with me, that they've taken me in, given me shelter, clothes, food, water, sense of security, and helped me to see beyond myself, such that I now have a career, and more importantly, a larger purpose. These are things that I couldn't find in my home country. It's informed me of the importance of bonds of family. How they may seem fragile, but they can't be broken, other than in some imaginary way. But also, like RuPaul's Charles says in his Drag Racers, we can choose our family. And what that means is not that we can literally choose where and to whom we're conceived, but that we can choose who we grow closest to, and that friends can become family, and people that we never would have imagined even existed can become family. So on a road trip across America, I scheduled stops down in Florida to see my dad's friend Gene, and then I planned to go through Longview, Texas to see my cousins and aunt and uncle there, but between COVID and their vacation plans at the end of their school year there, that didn't happen. Then we stayed in Show Low and went through Bakersfield, California for Mike and to deliver the loot to his parents, and I had wanted to make it to LA to see an old teammate, Ron Allen, but couldn't fit it into the schedule. The car due back in 30 days on account of her credit card only covering insurance for that long, since I don't own a car or have insurance. I went to the Olympic Peninsula in Port Angeles basically just to see Zach. I mean, the scenery was definitely not working against us going, but we might not have made it down into Tampa had Gene not been there, nor so far north without Zach. And I was planning to reroute through Nevada to see another college teammate, roommate, and housemate Brian Marchak. If he wasn't in his Laurel, Montana home, we'd have gone to Nevada. But sure enough, he was in Laurel, so heading out of Yellowstone, we took off north over the Beartooth Pass that had just opened up and made some time on the other side of the mountain.
Going 100 on the flats for miles and miles, just dead straight. Cruise control won't go above 100. I'm stuck at 100.
Off again into completely different geology, elevation, soil, flora, fauna. Well, flora anyway. Over a mountain range into a new territory. What would likely have been how native tribes understood the land before they were relegated to only the least fertile and resource-scarce parts of the country. First time I recall talking to Brian Marchak, then known as Marzak, or Mars, was on the steps outside Wadsworth's dormitory hall at Michigan Technological University in Houghton, Michigan, just off US 41, during our early camp, a time when football players show up early before all the other students to begin a 2-day practice session. I don't know what exactly it was, but we made friends very fast. That's one of the most interesting and greatest things about youth. Kids make friends so quickly and without trying. Since working overtime at the Islamic Center in Saudi Arabia, I've come across an inspirational quote that says, "If you love your brother, tell him." It's so simple, yet so profound. I adored that man. Social media accounts be damned, I have only a couple people I call friends in this whole world. Most of whom I've met while working abroad do not fit into this category. And back in the US, I only really know people in my family and people I met before I turned 25. Moved around to the other side of the earth, where I've been working upside down and sideways ever since, relatively speaking. And I keep in touch with a few of those people, and in my experience, it seems like it doesn't matter how long I know a person or how much time I spend with them. Some of them I can't get close to, and there's always some space between us. That's not what I consider a real friendship. But with other people, I could spend only a fairly short amount of time with them. I feel like I've understood their core personality, and I like that. Now, I don't get to see my friends very often. And with Brian, I hadn't really spoken to him for years. Since he left college and moved across the country, and I went around the world, and we've barely kept in touch with one another. He's been busy building his life and family, and I've been out traveling and learning and doing other stuff. But even though so much time had passed since we had last seen each other and even heard each other's voices, I felt confident that the core person I knew for years at Michigan Tech would still be alive and well. I mean, my experiences there at Tech taught me that while it's certainly possible to shower with another man hundreds of times over several years and not truly know and understand that man, with Brian Marchak, it's quite the opposite. I've seen that man more times than I think I'll see any of my own. So yeah, he's my brother. Quick note, football players shower together in troughs. Okay. Anyway, Brian Brian shared the condemned house with me at 909 Ruby Street in Houghton, Michigan. The $600 per month heat bills, well, that's when we could afford them. And we ran a wood stove on top of that, and when I say we could afford them, I mean I bounced checks to the gas and phone companies to get us through the year. But we shared the duties of improving that house and keeping it from falling down, trying to live there. There was a door on the second floor of that house that opened up with nothing but air. Maybe there had been a fire escape there at some point, but Brian didn't care so much when he fell or jumped out that thing one night. There was a sinkhole in the corner of that room that was 2 feet deep. When we flushed the toilet, it rained in the basement. That is until the slumlord came and stole the toilet and left nothing but a hole in the floor where we had to aim real well to pee into that thing. Shower filled up with 3 inches of water within a minute, and anyway, it was condemned. As I said, the city inspector said the only thing that would help that house is a stick of dynamite. Brian found a boat somewhere alongside the canal there in Houghton and was the happiest skipper on the Portage Canal for maybe an hour until it sunk directly in the shipping lane with him in it. People on the shore just yucking it up and laughing. I painted skin back onto Brian's leg after he fell off a motorbike and got road rash, which in itself is interesting, but he was wearing tighty whitey underpants and a plastic lobster bib at the time. And sure, we had the classic college experience. We went smelting, caught only a buzz, and 6 smelt. We went sauna at 3 a.m. in the dormitory, jumped outside in the snow. Did a polar bear challenge and the like, and I got a closer look at an honest man who had at once the capacity to be an analytical problem-solving engineer, a responsible husband and stepfather, and as wacky as anybody I've ever met at an art college or rave or music festival or anything like that. And to be sure, while some of our ex-football teammates called he my better half and I his, we were and still are quite different. For example, when our dirty slumlord landlord for the condemned house sued us in small claims court for non-payment of rent, or actually no, he sued us for damages to the house, not for non-payment of rent. We presented evidence of our having improved the domicile in the city inspector's laundry list of code violations in the Michigan Landlord-Tenant Guidebook, which explicitly stated that tenants have the rights to withhold rent until buildings are brought up to code, which ours most certainly never was. Yet still the local judge decided in favor of the landlord on the basis that we didn't pay rent, yet lived there, even though, again, that was our right. And Brian paid the $283 or whatever to the landlord, whereas I did not, but instead told the judge to f*** off. Probably not the wisest decision I'd ever made in a small town, but my contempt for the mockery that was his courtroom did not abrogate his responsibility to make lucid and learned decisions by the letter of the law, which he absolutely did not. If we were to read into those divergent ways that Brian and I handled that incident, we could conclude that he had probably a more generally compliant mindset than I. And surely that led us in different life directions after college. Like many of our teammates and college classmates, he became a very successful engineer, whereas I quit engineering and decided to pursue some other passions that led me deep into the heart of Asia and the Middle East, only to recently have enough money to lead a lifestyle above the poverty threshold. So, as per usual, Nook and I arrived kind of late to Sandy and Brian's abode. Google Maps being an underestimate of the time it takes to get between places, if anything. Whereas when we set off on our journey and I planned all these spots, I thought that Google Maps would be an overestimate. Boy, was I wrong. So upon Brian's offer, I had to cancel and switch up some of the last camping destinations so we could stay another day and night at the Marchak residence there in Laurel. But most importantly, so we could take a ride on the river with Brian, Sandy, and Bill. Coincidentally, Bill grew up not far from Brian in Wisconsin. He went to our same university, and then he found work both in Nevada and then later in Montana, where Brian was living and working. and he shared the same interests as Brian. Now, apparently the local sheriff's office there in whatever county in Montana that is, had some radio PSA the year before or something, and the sheriff started off with some bit about how he wanted to give some safety advice to people on the river. So Brian and Bill listened up carefully, thinking they needed to hear this important message. And really, those rivers change by the hour, and they can get fairly dangerous. So nobody wants to get hurt or have an accident. So Bill and Brian listened to the sheriff, who said something like, "Now you folks are going to be out on the river, so I've got a couple of safety tips for you. First, once you're out on the water, go ahead and have a couple of beers." And maybe there was more to that message, but then again, maybe not. Either way, Brian and Bill were very concerned about their safety on the river. Bill was the safety manager in the back, while Brian manned the oars. And they were consistently asking each other if they felt safe or if they needed another safety device, because safety was the number one concern. And those who know me these days know that I tend to live a little more dangerously than some folks care for. So I took my chances, being the big risk taker that I am, and had a great ride all the same, safety not being my number one concern on the river there. I figure as far as all that goes, I was probably safer between the ages of 18 and 22 than most people will ever be in their whole life, so I can take risks anymore and live to tell about it. After the river cruise, we headed to a local joint where I found conversation with some old-timer at the bar, and it reminded me of the couple times in our dorm room at Michigan Tech when I called up the Euperus-sounding name in the Photon book in Houghton County and commenced to shooting the shit with whoever picked up the phone, and it was funny. Me pretending to be somebody they knew, Rudy or Toivo or some other old Finnish name, and we chit-chatted about making wood and throwing cards and sauna and going fishing and getting stuck in the mud and whatever. And after talking to that old man there, we went back to Brian's ranch by Bill's side-by-side, and we ate some of the elk and venison they'd shot. And after a beautiful sunset and visit with old friends and new, Brian sent us off with some meat, and we headed out of Montana. Maybe too quickly, considering I got my first speeding ticket in 20-some years there. For the whole 6,000 or 7,000 miles or whatever before coming over the Beartooth Pass, I'd kept that Charger within a few miles per hour of the speed limit. But something about the wide open landscape and 80-mile-per-hour speed limit made me want to just open the Hemi up on that beast. Blah! Man, that car could move. Still, the officer could have got me at 106 or so miles per hour if he had seen me a few miles before, or if he had been over in the county by the Beartooth Pass, he could have got me at 120 or whatever, after I decided to press the gas when the cruise control topped out. But anyway, he got me at 79 coming up from behind him and bumped it down to 75 and a 65. Only a $55 ticket, which I paid online happily since he didn't have change. I would have paid him right there on the spot with a smile on my face. Another reason why, as we told the officer, Montana was our favorite state of the whole trip.